Hello and welcome everyone to the Two Real Cinema Club. My name is Andres Lorente.
And I'm James Ruzicka, and every episode we watch two films, a new film and an old film, and we try to connect the dots. Talking of connecting the dots, actually, I was told off this week, we're supposed to talk about the socials before we talk about the films.
Nice segue.
This is what that was effortless, wasn't it? This is what the young people do, I think. So I'm going to mention right at the top of the show, because otherwise we always forget. I'm going to mention at the top now. So if you enjoyed the show, please do rate us on iTunes, or iTunes doesn't even exist, does it? Rate us on Apple Podcasts. Rate us on the gramophone, and you can find us on Twitter. We are at Two Real Cinema Cine Club. You can find us on Instagram at Two Real Cinema Club. You can even email us now. There, I got that correct, isn't it? That was correct. So we are the Two Real Cinema Club at Gmail. So we're on the internet. Do come and find us if you can. We'd love to hear from you. What are we talking about this week?
We are talking about two films. First is Top Gun Maverick, recently released 2022.
2022.
The big return of Tom Cruise and the Top Gun gang, as well as the 45 film. Is that right?
It was 45.
45. Yeah. They Were Expendable, directed by John Ford, and featuring John Wayne in another wartime or military epic film.
Yeah.
Are you ready to do this?
I think so.
Shall we get started?
Yeah. How did you get on with your viewing of Top Gun Maverick?
Oh my God, perfect circumstances. It was a late night film, 10-ish, big screen, one other dude in the audience. So I was actually able to use my phone. When I'm in the theater, it's hard to take notes, so I used the drink holder to hold my phone, and occasionally I would just hit the light so that I could take a few notes.
Oh my God, you're that guy.
I am that guy. Well, in that, again, perfect circumstances. In this setting, I was able to be that guy. I'm not always that guy. Sometimes I write in the dark, and then it's absolutely impossible to read my chicken scratch. And
yes. I've done that with notebook on the lap, and you just kind of scribble, and you think, well, I think that's about the right place. It feels like halfway down the page.
Exactly.
And then interpreting it after the fact is, why did I even bother writing this?
It does excuse some of my lousy commentary, but these circumstances were great. Big screen. And I can scarcely contain my excitement. I don't know if I'm embarrassed or ashamed. This is not generally my kind of film, but I'm going to say some positive things about something that normally I probably wouldn't. Yeah.
So this film is in the 10% of things you like.
Yes.
As opposed to the 90 of the things you don't.
It's crazy. And I think for both of us, it inspired a look back at the original Top Gun from 1986. So I'm sure we'll be talking about both films. So it's kind of a 3-for-1 or a 3-for-2.
Yeah.
Two Real Cinema
50%
Club.
extra.
I might have to change it to 3 Real Cinema Club for this one episode. So Maverick was directed by Joe Kosinski, who I didn't know him before. He's done a couple films with Tom Cruise, so they worked together. And the biggest title that I saw in the IMDb was Tron.
Yeah, it's Tron Legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, the original
was he's made mostly a career of remaking 80s hits.
There you go.
Or doing kind of like long-awaited sequels to 80s hits.
Which it's interesting because in one of my early film classes, the instructor did say that, he didn't understand why people were going back and remaking good films. Didn't make any sense to him because they've already made money. You're not going to top it. You're not going to take it anywhere new, really. So, and like Manchurian Candidate or Psycho, those are great examples of those disasters. He said go back and make rubbish films, and he was not a very good instructor, but I thought that was a beautiful insight. So Tron, you're not going to get worse than the original Tron, I don't think. And
we watched the original Tron a couple of years ago. Actually, I watched it with the children. Yes, it was ploddingly slow and difficult to watch now.
So I got to respect Kosinski. He's got a good gig going on.
Did you see Tron Legacy though?
What's that? No, I did not. No, I should probably see that. Yeah.
Yeah, because that also interestingly, we watched that in two halves. We watched the first hour and we kind of went away thinking, hey, people say Tron Legacy isn't good, but it's great. I'm really enjoying it. And then we came back and watched the second hour, and then we realised why people don't like it.
Changed your mind.
My advice, see the film, but only the first half.
Yeah, all right, that's a good note. He had $170 million to make this one. It's already grossed $750 million, so $750 million in. I think it's been out just maybe 2 weekends, I think so. Yeah, so 10 days, 2 weeks max.
It's Tom's biggest opening ever, isn't it? I think
it's yeah, and he does open the film. I'll talk about that too. But some of the some original people involved, like what's his name, Joel Bruckheimer. Is that his name?
Yeah, and Don Simpson gets his name on screen. Don Simpson is like one of the first names to appear on screen. Is he still
these are
alive,
the original,
Don Simpson?
The original producers from Top Gun in 1986 version. Some interesting writers in there. Peter Craig, Justin Marks, Aaron Kruger among them, Eric Warren, and Christopher McQuarrie among them. They wrote some of the Rings films, Mission Impossible, Usual Suspects is in there. So some writers with some good credits.
Eric Singer also wrote Transformers, I think.
That's right. Yeah. So it's sort of a mix of all these films. And very often if I see that many writers on something, I think, okay, something's wrong. But they got a lot right. So I'll hand it to them. I've never seen this before, I don't think. Not in a modern film, but Tom Cruise comes out and introduces the film. He's obviously as excited as we are. So he looks a little shaggy and older, but he does an introduction of the film. Again, you wouldn't see that very often, but I like that.
Now, wait a second. I don't think that was on my print.
Oh.
I don't remember Tom Cruise saying any kind of intro on the version that I saw in the UK.
Oh, wow. No, he's sitting in a theater, black T-shirt, shaggy hair.
Oh, what does he say?
He just says, welcome to Top Gun. This film's 35 years in the making, and he talks about how excited they were to make it and how proud they are of it. And then it's not a long introduction, but it's not something you see very often. So,
well, it's not something I've seen at all. We didn't get that in the European release. Yeah, that is not on the front of our print.
It could be it's the Scientology stuff. I think you guys are less tolerant of that wisely than we are here. So there's a big pill to swallow here, is that he's still a Scientologist. This is good work by Tom Cruise standards, but there was actually on the stream that I was just looking at on Yahoo, Leah Remini, who is a former Scientologist and very much working to expose Scientology, does say, hey, look, big film. Remember who he is, though. So we'll have to take a pill, calm down a little bit as we talk about it.
That's it. You know what? It has crossed my mind that I should join Scientology simply to try and improve my screenwriting career. It would probably be the single most effective move I could make, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you'd have that much control over the stories that you write, and you couldn't leave the compound.
It could work.
There are lots of throwbacks in this film to the earlier films, so it's good to go back and see Top Gun, I think, or at least remember, if you can, what happened in 1986. But it opens very similarly with the aircraft carrier, all this work on the carrier to get the planes up in the air and all the technology.
It opens identically, doesn't it? It's almost exactly the same sequence. Yeah. And I tell you one thing that really struck me right at the very, very beginning of the film, after not getting the speech from Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
There's this kind of bell, it's like synthesized bell sound effect.
Yep.
Which comes from like the original soundtrack to the first movie.
Yes.
And that was like Proust's Madeline to me. That was like immediately took me back to 1986. Just that one sort of synthesized sound effect.
Yeah.
Amazing how evocative that single sound is. So it was like the 80s were back here.
Yeah. Very intentional, but to a certain extent, I felt it was like too much like the 80s were coming back. It's like, I think you guys need some new original music as well. But psychologically, you're right. It did work to actually take you right back to the storylines and the ambience, the story world. So that was a success for sure. Let's see. Tom opens. He's sort of out in the desert. I think the Mojave Desert. He's sort of testing planes, and this new plane is going to try and break Mach 10. There's some interest in ending their program. It's too expensive or whatnot. But Tom sort of takes the plane into his own hands and proves that it can go Mach 10. It actually defeats that, even though, or surpasses that, even though the plane's technically not ready. And Ed Harris is in this film very briefly. He gets a little bit of like testosterone-infused lines as Commander Kane. He's saying, we're going to end this program. Tom, get out of the air, whatever. Don't do this Mach 10 test, whatever. But, of course, he succeeds, and he does break the Mach 10. But he also, I think he loses that plane. Jimmy, did I miss that? I mean,
it smashes up completely, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it's crazy because that's, I would assume, millions, probably $1 billion of aircraft just gone, and we're going to see some more dollars go up in smoke in this film. But he was sort of unauthorized to do it. He did it anyway. But he does succeed, of course. And then he sort of ends up in this scene really bothered me a little bit. He kind of ends up in this just caricature-like hillbilly mountain town, and he's jettisoned from his aircraft, and he sort of finds his way back home, but through this town. It didn't make sense. It was like a real throwback. It didn't even feel like the 1980s, for that matter. It was like that 1950s or 60s. So that was a little bit odd. But I think an early message that comes across is, and this will be a theme, I think, throughout this film that I liked, team play and cooperation. It seems like he's more worried about his team. Like, he feels like he knows what's going to happen to me if he doesn't succeed in this trip, but he also knows what's going to happen to his team if he doesn't succeed. And that means they're all going to lose their jobs and they won't be getting that military funding money in the near future. So he's doing it for the team, literally. It's a little heavy-handed, but it's a nice message, I think. He gets, as a result, he's not really punished, but he's brought in to do this training.
Yeah, he's kind of rewarded, isn't he, for smashing up the $1 billion plane?
Exactly. Oh, we want to make you the instructor of the next big project. And it's in an unnamed country, but there's some sort of uranium storage facility being
Sorry,
installed.
just a kid. It's a lot like imagining like turning up to the bus driver's course, and they tell you like, here's the 3-week bus driver's course. We're going to turn you into a bus driver, and here's your instructor, and it's a guy getting out of the wreckage of the most expensive bus ever made.
Yeah, he's
saying,
literally
I'll
still
teach you how to do
smoking.
this.
So he's asked to go to San Diego, of course, where the Top Gun training academy is, and now he's the instructor. So he's sort of taking over the job that is it Kelly McGillis did in the earlier film, which is interesting. Straight away we meet Jennifer Connelly, who's Penny, the daughter of an admiral. She's actually mentioned in the first film. She doesn't appear in the original film. I don't know if her part was cut out or if she was really just a name drop in the first film, but she appears in this film as the owner of the bar. She's moved back to that area, and I think it's called the Hard Deck. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think is it hard deck or is it hard floor or something like that? Yeah,
I think it's hard deck.
I didn't note that, but yeah. Okay.
So I had to look that up. It's actually a referral to 10,000 feet of altitude. Anything that happens, I guess, 10,000 feet and above. 10,000 feet exactly is the hard deck. You're supposed to do all your stuff above 10,000 feet, but in this film they get very low, as we'll see. There's a long bar scene, so he's sort of just observing some of the pilots who he might be instructing and training. This scene was a little bit captivating to me, and it's funny because there's a similar scene in They Were Expendable where he's just observing, but you can hear some of the young pilots' conversations, and typically I don't think he would actually hear that in the bar, but he's watching and observing, and you're getting a lot of their character development, and he's analyzing them for their characters because he's going to determine who's going to go on the big mission. It's a really interesting scene.
That said,
yeah, go ahead.
Do they really have much in the way of characters to analyze?
Not really. I mean, they're kind of stock for sure. You've got the what's his name, Hangman, who's kind of the asshole, but he's egotistical. He's a good pilot, and he'll come back later. You've got Rooster, who is Goose's son from the first film, played by Miles Teller. Yeah. He's one of the potential pilots.
His personality is mustache.
Yeah.
Yes,
mustache, and he wasn't in uniform. He was wearing sort of a Hawaiian shirt or something, buttoned down, chest exposed.
Mustache and chest.
Yes, so mustache and chest. That's his characterization. These are experienced screenwriters. Remember that. So he's really kind of just getting himself back in the environment, but he's got a totally different role now, and he's really like adult and an observational, which he was not in the first film, of course. There are lots of even callbacks and even flashbacks to the first film, so it really connects pretty quickly. It's very funny though because he's kicked out of the bar for, I guess, not paying. He had to buy everyone drinks because he did something or said something. I forget what it was exactly, but there was some rule that Penny has where you have to buy everyone a drink. And it's very similar to the original Top Gun in the sense that Hangman and some of the others throw him out of the bar, and then they find out the next day that he is their instructor, just as Tom Cruise had been hitting wildly on Kelly McGillis, only to find out the next day that she will be his instructor. So they're really...
It's exactly the same beat,
Yeah, lots of the same beats, lots of callbacks, and as I said, flashbacks earlier. But I think the most important thing is that we do meet Miles Teller, who's playing Rooster as a potential pilot, and there's history there. because Maverick had something to do with Rooster not being able to get into the academy. He held his papers back, I think in part because he felt guilty about being in the accident where Goose, Rooster's father, had died. And this is something that they have in common because actually in the original Top Gun, Maverick was not allowed to join the academy because the perceptions of how his father was as a pilot. But Mav's much more all about bringing everyone home alive now, and he's grown up. He's a team player, as I said. That theme does come out to me anyway.
I think so. Yeah. Though, I guess the first time we see Mav in the film, he's kind of having breakfast on his own, isn't he? It's like he is a team player, but he keeps but he's also sort of a man apart. He's still kind of, he has no family. He's still sort of alone, isn't he? Yeah,
he's still the Maverick. that's exactly, he lives up to the name. Yeah. He lives that lifestyle, but he's still a great flyer. I think that's what we need to know. And now he's going to be a great instructor, or at least try to be a great instructor. And the Iceman is in the background there. Val Kilmer's character is now an admiral. He has throat cancer. He has some sort of cancer illness. Val Kilmer, of course, in real life has throat cancer.
Yeah.
And it seems like Val Kilmer is the one who kind of, even though he's just trashed this airplane, he elevates Maverick to an instructor at Top Gun. This mission is crazy. You're flying down into a valley and almost like through canyons in order to drop a few bombs. It's a near impossible mission, but this is the man of Mission Impossible, so he can do it. We know that. There's a lot of movement in this film. There's sailing at high speed, motorcycling at high speed, of course, aircraft carriers moving quickly, flying in canyons. This is like that Need for Speed that they were calling for in the original Top Gun.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, a couple thematic statements. One early on is like, no time to think about the past. This comes up at some point. Like, it's time to move on, and this film does move on. I did like that about it. It definitely has a very good grounding 35 years earlier, but it does move on. So they are leaving the past behind. And there's this scene finally after Maverick has sort of been chastised by John Hamm's character. John Hamm plays another grouchy commander. A lot of these military guys are just kind of grouchy and they yell. And,
yes. Yeah.
So I don't know how hard those roles are to play, but John Hamm's yelling at him. And eventually Tom Cruise goes to the Iceman himself, who's not doing well. This is a pretty extraordinary scene, Jimmy, so I'd love your take on it as well. But it's a scene where Val Kilmer, he can deliver a couple lines, but they end up having this typing exchange where he's typing and Tom Cruise has to sort of carry the scene. And I was impressed. I thought Tom Cruise did a great job in that scene. I know that it probably meant a lot to both of the actors, but he was acting, and he was acting pretty well. And Kilmer gets a line in there. He does it a bunch on the typewriter, keeps pointing to it. Something about it's time to let go of the past. So that theme comes up again. It's like we've got to move on. There are all these old stereotypes of who we are as humans, or what our characters are, and all this individualism. It's time to let go of the past and move on, which is a little bit ironic just because the film literally is banking big on past franchise material. Yeah. But it's an interesting piece of the film. What did you think about that scene?
So I must say, I had something in my eye during that scene. I did find it quite moving. Yeah. In real life, I don't think Val Kilmer can speak anymore. So when he does all the typing, and then he has a couple of spoken lines that he kind of gruffly kind of coughs out. Yeah. I think that is dubbed by another actor, really? Or they've done some sort of thing where they've sort of synthesized his voice.
Sure.
Because I don't think Val Kilmer can speak like that anymore. I have an observation about this film, which is that I think this is two films overlaid on each other like a double exposure. So there is the film about Maverick, the tearaway Top Gun instructor who has to turn the trainees into good material to fly this difficult mission. But there's a meta film which I think is kind of more what we've gone to see. I think the film is mostly exciting and thrilling and absorbing because it's almost like one of those IMAX documentaries about what it's like to train to be a pilot. Mm-hmm. So much of the stunt work is done for real that I think a lot of the enjoyment of the film comes out of seeing oh my God, that's the real actual Tom Cruise actually flying an actual plane actually really fast. It has the kind of there's a real kind of immediacy and veracity to it. And I think that is a large part of the core of the film. And I think this Val Kilmer scene fits into that groove as well. That I don't think that scene is, it's not about the characters and it's not about Iceman and Maverick. It's about Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
And it's kind of them acknowledging, this is probably Val Kilmer's last role. He's not well and he's not doing great. We're probably not going to see him on screen again. And it's a way for we, the audience, to say, well, you were cool and we loved you. And, you made some questionable movies, but actually you did some very enjoyable stuff as well. And we are kind of, acknowledging his pain and his passing and anticipating the time when he won't be in the world anymore. And I think that is absolutely what that scene is about. And the dialogue that happens between them about the mission and the plot of the film is just sprinkled on the top. The real meat of that scene is the hug between two actual real men who acted together as young men, and now their lives have gone different ways, and they're both much older. I did have a tear in my eye in that scene. Actually, I don't think I was the only one. It's a great scene. It's a great performance. I don't think it's great acting. I think it's a scene. It's a meta scene for we, the audience.
Good point. There was only one other guy in the audience. I don't know if he was crying, and I don't think I was either. But it was definitely moving. I liked it.
He didn't come down for a hug during that scene. He didn't.
Yeah, I should.
He's climbing over the seats, just saying, "I need to hold someone."
In the dark. Oh no, that would have been terrible. But also, yes, and I think a lot of any lingering animosity from the old days of Iceman and Maverick and their frenemy status probably melts away in that scene. It is lovely. Yeah, it's a nice piece. Comes really kind of right on the midpoint of the film too, which is telling, I think.
Right.
Sexy sex with Jennifer Connelly. They hook up. They've had this on and again, off again, as far as we can tell through the exposition. With much less of the silhouette tongue action of Cruise and McGillis in Top Gun. I mean, those scenes, you saw those. Woof.
I found that quite embarrassing to watch, even more embarrassing to watch in front of the children last night, actually. But yes,
terrible.
that was a bit too much.
There's
only so much you can cover up with some blue gauze, and I could see everything.
That traumatized me 35 years ago and again now. So.
Whereas it's actually quite a sweet it's a pretty sweet scene between Jennifer Connelly and Tom Cruise, isn't it, for this?
Yeah. That's another thing that really, I'll talk a little bit about the maturity of this film compared to the maturity of the original Top Gun, because, the characters are probably in their 50s at this point.
Yeah, I think they are.
And they've got this...
It's an age-appropriate romance, isn't it,
exactly.
as well?
Yep, it's totally age-appropriate. And Penny's daughter says, she's looking for trust. She says, "Do not break my mother's heart again," as he's trying to sneak out of the house. She knows he's there and she sees him. And so there's a little bit of this parents learning from children. There's another kind of theme there where it's not always about instructing someone younger, but it's also about learning from one another. I think that comes through. There's an accident in training that sets up this heart-to-heart with Rooster. And this sort of they don't necessarily make up immediately, but it's this long in the making explanation and apology about what happened and trying to get clear because Rooster's going to be one of these candidates to go on this very dangerous, perilous mission. And the Iceman succumbs to cancer, so that sort of sets up this, sort of do it for the Iceman kind of feeling that I think dominates the last part of the film. Tom Cruise is sort of selected to actually lead the mission. John Hamm says, I've got no choice, really. I've got to put you in it. And I think there's this anticipation that someone's going to die on this mission.
Yeah.
Is it going to be Maverick or not? So he's, it's a very dangerous thing. So he's going to lead, but Rooster's going to be his, I believe the wingman is the term that we hear there a lot. And I think you mentioned earlier, the structure of this film is really built around this whole mission. It sort of frames the whole story. And then things are just sort of layered on top of that. So we do get to an intense mission scene where they're going into this valley, as I said before, several airplanes even flying through the supports of bridges. I mean, there's some intense piloting going on.
Oh my God, yes, it's tense.
Yeah. It's and Tom gets hit. So I should say Tom. Maverick gets hit. Rooster's going to go back to save him. They both have jettisoned from their plane, but they're able to sort of link up on the ground and escape together. And that's when there's sort of this love-hate stuff. They're still working on their emotions. This is more of a psychological film than the previous one, I think. But they got to get out of this mess together. They end up stealing an old plane from the landing strip or airport of the nuclear installment, the uranium storage place that they've actually totally disabled. So it's going to be amazing if they get off the ground. They do, but they engage with another couple of pilots in a dogfight. And it's important to note that the enemy is never really named in this film. It's really just this uranium storage thing, or I think, honestly, the enemy is a lot of our past and what we carry with us. But so they do get into a dogfight.
And that's
just
a very,
when they're about to bite it, Hangman comes to the rescue.
I was going to say your interpretation of the enemy is the past here.
Yeah.
That's a for a clever interpretation.
I think that's
I like that.
Yeah.
I wrote on my notes here that this film occurs in a geopolitical Disneyland.
Yeah,
that this kind of, it's super vague and generic. It's it's just they don't name the country. They just say, oh, there's kind of some country, and it's got sort of some mountains, and it's got some forests, and it's got some snow, and it could kind of be anywhere. And I'm guessing we're supposed to think it's Iran, but it doesn't really kind of look a lot like Iran. And even this kind of uranium enrichment plant that they have to bomb just seems kind of amazing to me. That maybe this is naive of me, but I don't understand how you can have a uranium enrichment plant, in a valley where there's no, there's no trains, no roads,
How do you get
no
it there?
landing pad, no nothing. I mean, how are they getting the uranium there? There's utterly no infrastructure at all, and yet somehow they've got like a whole staff of people down there to enrich uranium. So I don't understand how any of that works.
Yeah.
And I think I agree. I think the film doesn't expect you to ask, or doesn't expect to offer an explanation about how any of that works. It's purely a MacGuffin. But you're right, the enemy is the past. That's great. I'm going to write that down.
Oh, please do.
Sorry, I interrupted. Carry on.
No. We're almost there. That's the sort of the climax of the film. The denouement involves Rooster and Mav getting together at the hangar where Tom has been working on this plane, maybe restoring an old plane. And he's looked for Penny before back at the flight deck, and she's on this long road trip. Turns out she and her daughter pull up onto the runway in her fancy sports car. They fly off into the sunset together, presumably in the plane that he's restoring. And as I said, I think this film's a very good ride. Ultimately, it sort of can't help itself, so it does dissolve into some of these past cliches, and you've got the sunset and the planes sort of doing some maneuvers, and they're flying off into ecstasy and their future together, I guess. But I liked it. I did like it. Couple things that I thought of, like Rooster is probably way too young to be Goose's son. I mean, I assume this takes place in 2022, so you see Rooster he's a 5-year-old in 1987, so he'd be late 30s. I mean, I think that's a little old for the young pilots, but I'll buy it. It's no big deal. But if you start thinking on those
good point.
things,
Yep.
Yeah. But I did think
I didn't spot that.
In general, I thought it was just far more forward-thinking and more modern. There's a very diverse cast. There are lots of women pilots and pilots of color and mature characters. It's less violent. It doesn't have as much of the toxic masculinity or testosterone-fueled stuff that we expect in these films. And the problems were kind of believable. The characters were wrestling with them, and they were believable. And you're wrestling against past tendencies. So I'll come back to that. And say that it's a surprisingly psychological film. This is the thing that, wasn't just dogfights and explosions the way another film might have been, or this film might have been earlier. It's very interesting to have a sequel come 35 years later when the characters have to be more mature. They have to be more developed. And there's a lot of odd sort of wrestling with exposition. You're not talking about exposition back a few years and, recently. You're talking about trying to cover 35 years of exposition sometimes, which was, they didn't do a whole lot, but you do get these little explanations once in a while that have to cover decades as opposed to being something recent. But maybe it succeeds on one level because of that, because it's not... we've talked about it being about the past, but they're not wrestling with the past and like trying to just make Top Gun again. They actually are taking it somewhere distant and somewhere well into the future.
Yeah, no, they are. I was asking myself the same question that we always ask: what's it about? And I sort of wrestled with this a little bit because when I left the cinema, I did kind of feel that, Tom Cruise's character doesn't feel like he is much different at the end of the film to the character that he was at the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't gone through that much of a journey, and it took me a while to try and sort of dissect out exactly what's happened to him. And I've sort of figured out, I think really he starts the film like as a child, doesn't he? That he's on his own, he's eating his breakfast on his own, he's playing with his kind of toy plane.
Yeah.
And then when things don't go away his way, he smashes up his toy plane. So he smashes his toys, throws everything out of the pram, dumps everything. He's kind of reaching for adulthood, but I think that he thinks his attitude is that adulthood will be achieved through sacrifice. Which is something we'll come on to, I think, when we talk about the John Ford film in a minute. Yeah. So he's already sacrificed Rooster's respect for him. So he promised Rooster's mum that he would get him out of the kind of the fighter pilot program, and he did his best to do that, which means that Rooster hates him now. And so that was kind of his sacrifice, and he's kind of learning even that sacrifice was not enough. He's going to have to sacrifice himself to protect Rooster. So he goes on the mission, he has the goodbyes to all of the other cast members before he goes on the mission, fully expecting not to come back. And then at the very end of the movie, Rooster is going to get shot down. So Tom Cruise kind of puts his plane in the way, and he takes the bullet. And he's made his ultimate sacrifice, and because if he hopes that that's what's going to get him to adulthood now, it's the end of his life, but he's going to die as an adult. He's made it. But then, amazingly, he survives, and Rooster comes after him, and you get this final 15 minutes of the movie, which is sort of quite a different tone to the whole of the rest of the second act. It sort of becomes this sort of buddy comedy, and I think it's Tom Cruise's character realizing that becoming a real adult isn't about jumping in front of the bullet. It's about staying alive to repair and nurture the relationships that he's already got. That this idea of sacrificing himself, isn't a noble solution at all. It's actually kind of it's a coward's way out, and that the real bravery is him staying alive and looking after the people who are close to him and trying to grow into those relationships. So I think that's the change that he goes through. The beginning of the film, there's a shot of Tom Cruise on his own tightening a nut on this airplane that he's repairing or renovating. And then at the end of the movie, you get exactly the same shot. He seems to be tightening the same knot, but he gets halfway through it, and then he invites Miles Teller, Rooster, to come and finish off tightening it up. Yep. And I think that is his character development, isn't it? It's like he's sort of growing a proxy family around himself, or accepting some of these responsibilities. So I think that's the journey that he goes through. But it's not kind of front and center. I mean, the thing that is front and center in this movie is, oh my God, there's actual Tom Cruise actually flying an actual plane, actually really fast. That is 60% of what I think is fun about the film, and that is really fun.
Yeah, it's but you're right. I think there's growth in his character. It's not massive growth, but it's growth, and I think that's for many of us, that's all we can expect, and that might be all we do. But he's done it. You're absolutely right on that point. Yes.
Well, we'll talk a bit more about sacrifice. I'm sure when we come back after the break. But let's have a quick break now, and then we will come back and we will have a chat about John Ford's They Were Expendable. And we're back to talk about a different view of militarism on screen. So first time, this is exciting. This is the first time we get to talk about a John Ford film on the pod. Now, am I right? Now, do I remember this right? Did John Ford build part of your school? Did you tell me that?
No. John Ford graduated from my school.
Oh, right.
I think around 1913 or 14. I think he was born in 1894. So he would have graduated somewhere in the 12s to the 16s or something like that. So he grew up on, born in Cape Elizabeth, not far from here, and then grew up on Peaks Island. And I think a lot of the boating, he's kind of an expert in boating. I think he grew up on the water and came to our school in Portland, probably by boat every day because he lived on the island. And then I always have this idea that we had a massive expansion around it probably started in 1914, maybe when he was still there in his last year of school. I think the completion was 1918, but I always have this idea of him, kicking around that grounds, and as a young teen, probably not exactly clear what he was going to do. And inside that part of the building is the John Ford Theater. So he was kicking around on something that is now named after him, which is mind-boggling. But yeah, he's a legend around here. They called him, I think, his original name is Feeney. He was Bull Feeney because he was a big football player, and they called him Bull Feeney. And I think he was originally Jack Feeney, maybe, and changed it to John Ford for the movie industry. Yeah, and I don't know if the Ford Coppola's, if there's any relationship there, because he followed his brother out to Hollywood and became a director.
I think famous storyteller. I think for a lot of the time, John Ford claimed to have been born in Ireland, but actually, this is all complete nonsense.
Born in Maine, yeah.
So They Were Expendable, 1945. It's John Ford's last army film. He had been a commander in the U.S. Navy Reserve during the Second World War. He was the head of the photographic unit for the Office of Strategic Studies. The film was written by Frank Weed, who was also a U.S. Navy aviator. So he was kind of, these guys were the Mavericks of their day in real life. Great cast. Robert Montgomery, John Wayne, who's he? Donna Reed. And the story is about a naval torpedo boat crew. So at the start of the movie, Robert Montgomery, John Wayne, they're part of a PT boat crew, patrol torpedo boat crew. They're hanging out in the Philippines. They're waiting to see action in World War II. And John Wayne is writing his application for a transfer to a destroyer because he's bored of sitting out the war and not seeing any action. And then Pearl Harbor happens. That's 1941, am I right?
Yes. I thought it was 42, but maybe it was right? 41. I thought it was 42, yeah.
Okay.
But it does, you're right. It says 1941, the year of our Lord, 1941. If you saw that on the... That's the title card there.
Of the opening crawl.
Yeah.
So they're mobilized, and the big Navy brass are a bit skeptical that these PT boats will be any good. And like the Admiral says, something like, your boats are very maneuverable, but I need something more substantial. Mm-hmm. And so they're told they're just going to do messenger runs. But true to John Ford's themes, his films are always about sort of outsiders. So Robert Montgomery and John Wayne, they're kind of outsiders, and they decide they're going to do their own thing. So they go out and they sink some Japanese vessels. So they very quickly prove their worth. There's some very exciting scenes of them going out at night with these little tiny wooden torpedo boats with these massive torpedoes mounted on the side of the boats. And they find these Japanese destroyers, torpedo them, and they get shot at from the ship, and they get raided by light aircraft. But they manage to gradually pick off these Japanese boats. Lots of explosions, lots of water thrown into the air. But for all their heroism, gradually the boats and the crew are picked off. And over the course of the movie, the US is retreating and it abandons the Philippines. And this movie is all about a campaign that the US lost. That they retreated and left the region, planning to come back. And it's about that campaign. John Wayne, as Rusty, has a septic arm from a shrapnel wound, so he gets sent to hospital, and there he meets Sandy, a nurse played by Donna Reed. He falls in love, and they have this very sweet, very chaste kind of love affair. But gradually, after he gets back into action, there are fewer and fewer boats, fewer and fewer crew, and then eventually Montgomery and Wayne, they're told, that's it, we're withdrawing. You two, you've got to come with us to Australia. We're going to send you back to the US to promote and build up a new fleet of PT boats. And the other remaining crew, they are basically left behind on the Philippines to fight or die. It's a film all about sacrifice, and it's dignified, beautifully shot, bit of a downer. It's a very, very different view of the Navy and of militarism compared to what we've seen in Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. And interesting to see a film that's taken from an utterly different perspective. I was watching this film asking myself, what is the function of the film? After Top Gun, I think Navy recruitment skyrocketed because everybody watched Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis riding around on motorbikes, having a great time, and thought, well, I want some of that. I'm going to sign up for the Navy. It looks awesome. Whereas the function of this film is utterly the opposite. John Ford is not in the business of persuading anyone to join the Navy. It's a film about remembering, and about remembering those who sacrificed. And it expounds that view, it tells that tale, portrays these characters beautifully. Did you enjoy this film?
No. I don't think so. This is the second time I've seen it. The first time was at school.
Yeah, we saw it together at school.
We did,
yeah.
And I remember not liking it a whole lot then. I mean, there's some things that I will talk about that I do like, but overall, no. I think the story is just too weak. It's really a slow script. I think it's long by 45 minutes at least. And I think he's sort of out of his element here, which is funny because he's in his element absolutely as a soldier, and I felt like he was out of his realm in his element as exactly the same amount as a filmmaker. So it was very strange. Like because I don't know that he left film for a little while, but he did that time in the Navy, and he was doing photography for the Navy, as you said. But it's almost as if the Navy part, the soldier part, took over on this film. He does some interesting things as a filmmaker that we'll talk about, but I think as a result, it doesn't wash over me very well. It's just a very funny film, and it's about the same length as Top Gun. It's like 2 hours 10 minutes.
Yeah, it is.
So they're very similar, and there are lots of similarities we can talk about. But I just don't think that they ever nailed the story. Like the Donna Reed stuff, I love Donna Reed. It felt just like pasted in there without much sincerity. It was not. It was a gentle love story. There's that whole dinner scene where John Wayne has her over for dinner with these 6 other soldiers. What is that for? There was a dance scene at a hospital. All of a sudden, they go from surgery to a dressed up dance, and there were some strange things in there. And a lot of there were a lot of silences that were not really like pregnant or interesting silences, but just these slow things where I don't think they knew what to write for dialogue, so things felt really stilted. So this is not a film that I'm going to recommend for story, but we can talk a little bit about some of the techniques that I thought were very interesting and some of the things that do succeed. But I think that was it. It was too much a soldier film and not nearly enough a filmmaker's film.
The thing it most reminded me of is, I don't know whether you've seen this, The White Ship, which is a documentary film made in the Second World War by Roberta Rossellini. Have you seen that?
No.
So that's a beautiful, very moving film, which strikes a similar sort of tone. It's a documentary, and it's just following the story of a hospital ship in the Second World War. And it's very, very humane, like all of Rossellini's films, and it really kind of drills down into the characters of the people who are on this ship. It's beautifully made. This film reminded me quite a lot of that. I've written here that the hospital scenes are brutal, rushed, shadowy, empathic. Those are the 4 adjectives that I wrote down. That the scene where the surgeon is doing his best, rushing through. They get like 200 patients in a night, and he's got to just quickly sew up one guy, wash his hands, wheel in the next. We're going to sew him up, wash my hands, wheel in the next. And it's just relentless. And they do this in silence, but it's kind of shadowy, and you don't see anything explicitly on the screen. It's all covered by a sheet, but you just get this kind of quiet desperation.
But you get these shots of Donna Reed in there that don't seem like they belong in the same scene. She's there. At one point, she's wearing a baseball cap, but she's in a surgical theater or something. And then it seems like he wanted close-ups of her, but it didn't look like she was doing anything. She was in a darker setting than the film was, or the rest of the scene was. There were a lot of what I thought kind of struck me as kind of amateur mistakes in the shooting. That was this one thing that really... Yeah, and this is a technique that you see in the older films where they'll go from a wide shot, they go to a mid-range shot. And if the actor's not doing exactly the right thing, the same thing that they did in the wide shot to the mid, you get this disorienting look. and the blocking has to be exactly the same. So you see this in older films. I mean, I think you'd have like a very superficial, wide shot or opening shot, and then you might go straight to something close up, so you get an idea of where the characters are in the scene. But when it's almost pointless to go to a mid shot from a wider shot, I think, and it's just strange the way it just doesn't cut together unless you've got great editing, and you've got to cut on movement. Of course, the actors are either not moving at all. That might be clean, or they've got to be doing the same movement. And there's this one scene at that dinner table where John Wayne is drinking something in the wider shot, and then they kind of go to a medium of almost the same shot, and his drink is already on the table, and it's just the movement's all wrong. And I think it destroys the flow. So I think one thing about this film is there is zero flow. I never felt like it was really moving progressively. Some of that's writing, but I think some of that was actually filmmaking. So I was just wondering, he's been out of practice. He's not making films for a couple of years. He's serving in the Navy. He comes back, and he's trying to do something. He's trying to make a Bergman film, I think. Ford was trying to do an art film at times, like there are those beautiful images of the people going through the tunnel to get in and out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And it's very noir. It's really beautiful. It's almost like they're going into the darkness and death and then walking back out into the light. But I don't think it really pays off in this film. It just seems the wrong film for that. And it looks like he's either trying to do, and with that shot that I was talking about with Donna Reed, it's almost like he's trying to go all the way back to Carl Dreyer and do, like in the what is that film about Joan of Arc? I think it's just called Joan of Arc, where there's a lot of real close-ups. So he's mixing things up. Those close-ups on Donna Reed looked like they were from a Dreyer film from the 20s or 30s, but it doesn't all add up. It's very strange. And I thought, boy, was he out of practice as a filmmaker because he'd been in the Navy for a couple of years? So there were a lot of what I thought were kind of rudimentary errors just in filming it. There are also a couple of just fantastic scenes, like some of the stuff with the boats blowing up. Those are beautiful. I mean, it sounds odd to say that, but just the destruction of the ships, it's really quite good for that age. I mean, it's
absolutely spectacular, isn't it? They get hit with 2 torpedoes, and then there's just 5 minutes of fireworks while each bit of the ship blows up in turn. Yeah, and
a lot of those flares, those big flames that are in the air all the time, they're really quite convincing. It's great. And there's this one scene at the end. I don't know if you caught this, but they're obviously using a lot of rear projection. I think there's this one scene where this troop is marching along this road where Brick, Montgomery's character, and Rusty, John Ford's character, sitting on the side of the road, and it's actually a projection on a screen. So there, it's a laid over shot where they're sitting on the road, and then the action on the road is actually on a completely different screen coming at them, and it's literally smoke and mirrors. They got all this smoke from fires and things coming up, and screens and mirrors, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's really hard to notice it. I mean, it looks very well done. So there's
black and white really lends itself to that, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. So it's an odd film in that sense, and there's so much expertly done stuff, but there are also what I thought were a lot of just painful mistakes that I saw.
I think some wonderful faces in this film.
Yeah.
I think Ford kind of boasted about calling himself the best photographer in Hollywood at one point in an interview, and I think he was right. Some of the composition, especially on the close-ups in this film, just so beautiful. I was asking myself, why doesn't every film look this good?
Yeah.
Because it's just so beautifully set up, so beautifully lit. I thought there's an early scene where Robert Montgomery is getting his orders, and he's being told, you guys have just got to carry messages across the bay. That's all your boats are good for. But the way that his commanding officer is lit, just with a ray of light across his face, and then Robert Montgomery turns away, and the same ray of light illuminates his face, and he's half in shadow and half in light. It's it appears effortless, but Montgomery must have hit his mark so precisely to let the light fall just across his face in just the right way. I think it's really beautiful. This film is very interested in faces.
Yeah.
And it's not just the faces of the main characters. Anyone can be interested in Donna Reed's face, but it's the face of the ordinary non-speaking characters.
Sure, Cookie, Doc.
Absolutely, people in the background, people who don't even have any lines.
Yep.
The camera really pays attention to their face.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. That's a big part of the humanity of the film. It's interesting how in Top Gun, we have a bunch of different characters, but those characters are all in some way kind of the same character, because if you're going to be a fighter pilot, those jobs only attract the same kind of people. So it's all kind of, even with the woman character, it's a high testosterone, sort of aggressive alpha type character. They're all the same. Whereas this is very much a film about regular people. It's regular guys, who are making the best of it, not the best of the best who are fighting to be at the top of this very narrow heap. And that kind of felt truer and more refreshing. Always good to see John Wayne on screen, don't you think? Did you not enjoy his scenes?
I hated John Wayne until we went to film school, and then I really loved John Wayne after that. So film school really did give it, and then I think we did a whole unit maybe on John Ford. That's why we saw a bunch of his films at once. And this is the kind of stuff that made me really appreciate John Wayne. It was good to see him on screen, and he's one of those faces too that obviously Ford liked to linger on in so many films. So it's great to see John Wayne. He brings exactly what he needs to. And he's not yet, he's sort of not in control in the way he is in so many other films where he is really the lead. And he's the man. This film has that connection to Maverick, I think, in a sense that there's sort of like this unlikely buddy bromance thing going on. Like he and Brick don't really get along that well. And there is a little competition between them, but, they obviously come together to complete their missions and such. But it's great to see John Wayne on screen. Not one of his better roles. I just this isn't as good as like Liberty Valance or some of the other John Wayne classics. I think
Stagecoach.
Stagecoach for sure. Quiet Man or Searcher, something like that. And I think part of it is just again, it's based on a book, and it almost felt too real to me. I know that's kind of stupid to say, but it seems like it was reportage without all the boring stuff edited out. It's like this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens without really a strong character through line. So I think you're probably right, is that it seems very accurate, and it includes everyone, not just the Top Gunners, but it's everybody as a community working together. And I think, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but I think you did talk about propaganda a little bit. Both of these films to me seem like propaganda. Like Top Gun, definitely recruiting would go up. As mundane as this one might seem at times, or as like a workmanlike it is, I still think it was made with lots of military support, obviously, and guidance, and you still are seeing all the cool stuff in war and all the torpedoes and things like that. So I think both films do, whether intentionally or not, they definitely work on some level as military propaganda pieces.
Just going to go quickly back to John Wayne. That interesting your comment about how there's sort of a bit of a rivalry between Rusty and Brick, between John Wayne and Robert Montgomery. And Robert Montgomery, is the ranking officer and he calls the shots. But there's a beautiful shot of the two of them, like a tour at the end when they're in the plane being evacuated. Yeah. And without anyone sort of talking about it or mentioning or whatever, John Wayne has got his arm around Robert Montgomery as they fly off. It's just this kind of it's lovely, kind of beautiful, casual kind of love and mutual respect between these two men. I thought that was great. Yeah. I'll tell you one thing about this film. This film knows how tall John Wayne is. Yeah. Whenever Donna Reed is talking to him, she's looking up like she's staring at a giant. I mean, I guess there were 18 inches between them. Yeah. And this is remarkably different to watching the original Top Gun from 1986, where that film has no idea how tall Tom Cruise is. Yes. And there's some scenes where Tom Cruise is looking up at Tom Skerritt, and then he's looking down at him later on, and then they're eye to eye. Yes. And it's like, I'm sure when they shot that film, Tom Cruise was standing on a box, but it was always a different box on different days. And they could never quite figure out, we brought the wrong box, no. I
just want to thank you for mentioning that, because this was actually in my notes, was that in Maverick, Tom Cruise was finally acting his height.
Because he does that now.
Yeah, he does that now. Yeah, which is very interesting. Yeah. So again, there's that growth not only in the character but also in the actor. Or maybe it's not growth. Maybe it's if you're shrinking. I guess it's not growth. Anyway, but the point is
a general contraction. Yes.
So yes, they're both acting their real heights in these films, which is wonderful.
So a hit and a miss, it sounds like, from you.
From me, yeah. I mean, I've seen it twice now. I'm not going to see it again. I'm not going to tell anyone to run out and see it, but I would say, you need to know that it's a longish film and that there are things to look for in the filmmaking as well as but there's not enough to look at in the storytelling.
Watch it at 1.5 times speed. Yeah. Who would have thought a few months ago that you would be telling people that you preferred the Top Gun sequel to a John Ford film.
I know.
What crazy times we live in.
It's character growth in my own person.
Right. Okay. A hit and a miss.
Yeah.
I enjoyed them both. I think They Were Expendable is beautiful, but know what you're getting when you go in, which is kind of a semi-documentary.
Yeah.
And some lovely pictures of John Wayne.
Good point.
So I've enjoyed this. Definitely, I think everyone should go out and see Top Gun Maverick. Oh, wait a second, $750 million. It looks like everybody already has.
Yes.
So go and get your second tickets and see it again.
Good point.
And I hope you will join us for the next episode.
Yeah.
Thanks and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.